Hello everybody, my name is Christine Nielsen, and if this is your first time joining Wellness Wednesdays, welcome. I serve as the Assistant Director for Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Initiatives within Healthy Campus, which is our health promotion department here at Clemson University, housed within Redfern Health Center. So today we're going to talk about cultivating gratitude. And I think this is a very timely topic given the holiday season coming up, and especially because just within this whole entire year, I think it's been a struggle, at least it has been for me, to see the good in the world and also just in my everyday life. Sometimes it's been pretty difficult to do that. So hopefully today, we'll give you some very practical tools and tips on how we can better cultivate gratitude in our lives. So I'm just gonna run through some of the learning objectives for today. So hopefully at the end of today's session, you all will be able to define gratitude. So we'll talk about, there's different definitions of gratitude, but I'm gonna pose one for you. The second is to identify the benefits of gratitude. So there's different reasons why we would want to practice gratitude on a regular basis, other than, it's a good thing to do, but it actually has some pretty relevant benefits to us. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about how do we actually cultivate gratitude. So what are some very practical practices for how we could do that? And then we have some additional resources as well. So I apologize in advance. My dog is, playing and having a good time in the background. So if you hear anything, that's what it is. All right, so first we're going to talk about what actually is gratitude. So again, there's different definitions that you can refer to, but the one that I'm going to pose to you all today is a definition by Dr. Robert Emmons, and he is a psychology professor at the University of California, Davis. And he's deemed as the world's leading expert in gratitude. So if you have had if you've read anything about gratitude or have delved into this at all, you probably have come across some of his work in the past. So he's been studying gratitude for well over 10 years, and he breaks down, this concept into two parts. So first, he talks about how it's an affirmation of the good or of goodness in the world. So it's the acknowledgement that good does exist, and then with that kind of affirmation is we're not ignoring, what's broken or difficult or, even despairing in the world or in our lives, or it's not, minimizing that or anything like that, but it's simply broadening our lens to see the good as well. And so if you have attended or viewed past Wellness Wednesdays episodes, this will sound a little bit familiar whenever we talked about putting our thoughts on trial. So again, when we're doing that, it's not just, we're only trying to think about positive things and ignore negative. No, we want to, acknowledge that there are negative things that happen in our lives, but we're just trying to broaden our lens so that we're not only fixating on the negative, but we're also seeing the good in the world. And so there's a lot of research done, around, why is it that people only focus on the negative things? And so there's some research around that I won't go into today, but we do know that's kind of what our natural tendency is to focus on what's wrong, what's anxiety inducing, what's dangerous. And that has its place, but we also want to affirm that there is good in the world. So, the second part of this concept and kind of, I think a natural next question would be, okay, so there is good in the world. Where does this good come from? What's the source of it? And so the second part of this is the recognition of where that good comes from. And so according to Emmons, he said that, according to his gratitude definition, it's that the recognition of goodness comes from outside of ourselves. So it's not innate necessarily in ourselves and what we bring to the table, but it comes from outside. And so he says the main sources of gratitude are not intrinsic, but are situated in other people or even a higher power. So a quote that I'll share with you from him. He says, "We can appreciate positive traits in ourselves, but true gratitude involves a humble dependence on others. We acknowledge that other people or even higher powers, if you're of a spiritual mindset, gave us many gifts, big and small, to help us achieve the goodness in our lives." And so I think that's a really key part of the idea of gratitude, because it kind of forces you to include others in this kind of practice. So it's not just, I'm grateful, that my hair looks good today, or I'm grateful that, something along the lines of something that because of what you've done, or what it's only intrinsic to you. But really, it's kind of an outward focus on where else has good come from in my life, and then an appreciation of that, and then it naturally kind of builds bonds between you and the world around you. So that's kind of how Emmons categorizes gratitude. It's, again, the affirmation of good. So there is good in the world, and then also a recognition of that good comes from outside ourselves. It's not just within. All right, so I want to talk a second about this. There's an article that I read, and it's All About the Glass. And I thought this article was really, really key, and something that I think will kind of help inform I guess kind of digest more our definition of gratitude and what we're talking about. So so the thing with the glass is, it was an article written by a lady named Christy Nelson, which she has a very her name is very scarily close to mine. So just to let you know, this is not me. This is a different person. But Christy serves as the executive director of a network for grateful living, which a lot of the material that I pull from today actually comes from that website, and I provide the URL at the end. And so if you are interested in finding out more information about this website and the great resources it has, I'd encourage you to do so. But Christy is a 25-year survivor of stage 4 cancer. And I can't help but think that much of what she believes about gratitude stems from her very real near-death experience and realizing what is truly valuable in life. What really makes life worth living, focusing on all the good around her, even in the midst of very dark seasons. So she talks about, the idea of a glass, right? So when she's talking about gratitude, she uses this analogy of a glass being half empty or half full. And we've all probably heard that too, right? I look at the glass as half empty or half full, depending on, if the person is optimistic or has a more kind of negative outlook on life. And so she says, life is if life is akin to a glass, and we are the way that we see the glass, then life at times can seem, to be filled with positive experiences that are overflowing the glass, right? So, you just got married, or you just had your first child, or you got you got a new job, or you got a new pet, or you went to your favorite restaurant and got a really great meal. And so it seems like these really good things in life, they're overflowing the glass with positive experiences. And then at other times, it can feel like the glass is half empty, or maybe even just completely empty. And that's when we are encountering more negative experiences, right? So, my car broke down, or I lost a loved one, or, in the times of where we are with, again, the pandemic. We're still talking about the pandemic even after, 8 months, and it's, I'm, continuing to have to quarantine, or my family is. And so, these negative experiences can seem to, dry the glass out or knock it over. And every person we know desires for their cup to be full, right? So we want it to be full with love and family, adventure, peace. But the problem with depending so much on our cup being full is that inevitably, we all know this, life happens and it dries up or gets knocked over. So what are we left with when our experiences turn negative? So what do we do when we feel that way? So Christy emphasizes focusing not on the fullness or emptiness of the glass necessarily, but actually on the glass itself, the fact that there is a glass. So kind of extending this analogy, life with all of its ups and downs, so with the glass being full or empty, is in itself a very precious gift and something to cherish. And so I'll put part of the quote up here. But she writes, "It seems to me that underneath all the inevitable risings and fallings, feeling deeply content or joyful is not actually about how full the glass is or seems. It is about being grateful for having a glass at all. Being grateful for simply having a glass is key, because without it, half of anything would not matter." So without being alive, we would be incapable of experiencing any kind of joy or sorrow. So one way to reframe our outlook on negative experiences is to acknowledge that, yes, there are unpleasant at best and devastating at worst experiences that we can encounter. But surrounding this experience is the life that we're living. And that we have air in our lungs to breathe through this difficult time, and eventually we'll come out of it stronger. So this outlook has a very steadying effect. She believes, and I tend to agree. So we're fixating on the gratefulness for life itself, and that provides some type of anchor for when the waves of life crash down. So the same life that, yes, at times brings pain and sorrow is also the same life that brings truly joyful and deeply satisfying moments. When we're encountering, being surrounded by loved ones, or we're just in a really, we go on a really awesome trip, or we, just things like that bring so much joy to our lives. That's the same life that can bring good and bad. And so it's, she really again fixates on the fact that we even have a cup at all to hold experiences, good and bad, is something to be truly grateful for, and something that we're going to talk a little bit more about later on in the talk. And so I think something that I just wanted to bring in was was something that a researcher named Brene Brown, and if if that name sounds familiar to you, it's likely because you've listened or heard of her talk on sympathy versus empathy, which is a really phenomenal talk. I would encourage you can just Google Brene Brown empathy, and then it'll come up. But she's done a lot of amazing work in the realm of psychology. But she talks about, something similar or something kind of along the same lines as this. And the reason I bring it up is because my temptation is to say, well, why can't we just be grateful for the life, for the glass that holds the good experiences, but I don't want the negative experiences, right? I just want the good experiences. And Brene Brown talks about, in order to experience a positive emotion, it comes at the cost of also experiencing negative ones. So she says it's impossible to take the good without the bad. And she has actually a quote on this, but I couldn't find it. But essentially, the gist of it is that you cannot selectively numb or dull painful emotions while still being able to feel positive ones. So if you want to dull or numb the pain, you're also going to dull or numb the goodness or the joy in your life as well. And so, we in order to experience good things, we also have to be able to experience and process through the bad as well. So I think that's something that's kind of helpful, I think, in the context of talking about gratitude today. All right, so we're talking about what gratitude is. I want to quickly go through what gratitude is not. And this is not obviously an exhaustive list, but I think this is helpful to kind of frame, our discussion. So the first part is that gratitude is not circumstantial. So what do I mean by that? Well, Christy Nelson, she distinguishes between gratitude and gratefulness. But for the sake of today's presentation, we're really just going to use them interchangeably. But I do want to kind of let you know how she teases them out. So gratitude, in her opinion, is more of a reaction to when we get or experience something that we want, right? We get a new car, we get a new dog, we get a promotion, so it's very dependent. Our joy is very dependent on what happens to us. But it's very difficult to feel gratitude when the glass is knocked over, right? We just talked about that. So trying to experience gratitude becomes, just another chore, endlessly trying to create experiences so that we feel gratitude. Gratefulness instead is an orientation towards life. So it's independent of what happens or what doesn't happen to us. So she says, to wake up feeling grateful just for being alive and having our hearts and senses open to the gifts and opportunity that life provides for us. So again, it's a way that we arrive at life independent, again, of our circumstances. So I think that's really helpful, especially I think for me personally going into the holiday season. This will be a very, interesting one just with everything that's happening with the pandemic and all of that. And so, I think sometimes people have in their mind, I know I do, with this is how the holidays should look. This is how our food should taste. This is how many cookies should be made. This is what everything that needs to happen. And so I think sometimes my struggle is, well, if things don't happen that way, I'm not going to be joyful. I'm not going to be grateful. I'm not going to be happy. But I think that, when we're thinking about gratitude and gratefulness, it's not dependent on those things, right? It's more that, hey, I'm grateful that I even have loved ones to celebrate this holiday with, or I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to eat any kind of food, even if it doesn't come out the way that I thought it was going to, or something like that. Or I'm grateful that I have a mouth to chew the food that I'm going to eat, things like that. So it's not really dependent on our circumstances. So the second thing of what gratitude is not, it's not an appreciation for the things that we earn. So what do I mean by that? Gratefulness, is the emotion we feel when something returns to its normal state. So, for example, if your refrigerator breaks and the next day it's repaired, you experience gratefulness to have your refrigerator up and running again, right? Keeping food and drinks preserved for yourself and your family. Another example is if, a loved one gets in a car accident and they come out, unscathed, you are grateful that they are alive and well. But the problem with these circumstantial experiences of gratitude is that eventually that feeling wears off, right? That's kind of the human tendency, is that, we remember and then we forget very quickly. But we tend, after that kind of feeling of gratitude wears off, we tend to quickly reset to our fundamental assumptions, expectations, and even feelings of entitlement in life. So practicing gratitude daily, we'll talk about that more, of how to do that in a few minutes. That can help us cultivate a grateful orientation for life and appreciating the gifts we take for granted each and every day. So, it doesn't matter, and this is kind of talking about the emotion of feeling that when you feel whenever your refrigerator is fixed and you're like, oh, I'm so grateful that I have a refrigerator working again to keep my food preserved. It's that kind of mindset. It's not really even emotion. It's that mindset, even when things are going well, right? Even when it's that kind of that normal state that we are usually in. So it's kind of trying to put ourselves in that mindset. So I'm grateful for the air in my lungs, for my beating heart, for people that love me, for the sunshine, things like that. And I think of this kind of on a very practical level. Several months ago, I went on a hike with my husband, and I didn't fall or anything, but something happened where my back went out, and I just, I'm not super old, so I was like, what is going on? Why is my back, just acting out? And I was on the floor pretty much, because that was the only place that felt good. I was on the floor for, about 3 days. And I had never really thought about the fact that my back is so important, and how grateful, I should be that my back works most of the time. And so that kind of moment made me feel like, oh my goodness, like I'm so grateful for when my back, is going to feel better. And so now I think, I definitely don't appreciate it as much as I should. But there are times that, I'll think, wow, I'm just so grateful I'm not on the floor anymore, just not being able to move. So that's just kind of an example for my own life. Thirdly, gratitude, again, is not what we practice only when times are good. So we've talked about that. It's not what we practice without fear or pain. And so Christy Nelson actually writes, gratefulness asks, where can we find opportunities to grow and learn and love even in the darkest moments? And once the darkness has passed, how do we live fully and deeply in the present while also remembering that we once had a toothache, or in my case, a backache, and now we don't. So part of being human is that we remember and forget, as she says. So the work is to remember more often than we forget. So I think that's a really helpful point. And then lastly, gratitude is not an ignorance of what's wrong. So I just think this is so important to stress, because especially if you just kind of look up gratitude on something on social media or something, I see a lot of positive thinking, that kind of idea, but it's really not just focusing on the positive. It's an acknowledgement also that there is wrong in the world. So, we know practicing gratitude does not mean that we're ignoring what's broken or wrong in our lives and in the world around us. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we practice gratitude, we are becoming more awake and alive to what's around us. So we'll talk about that more in a second, but it's really just trying to, a lot of it has to do with mindfulness, of being aware of what's around us and appreciating that. And the things that are wrong or broken around us become less tolerable and less acceptable, and drive us to root them out of our lives. Again, to the extent that is in our power, right? We can't drive out all evil that's in the world or in our own day-to-day lives, but the things that are in our control, to say, hey, this isn't good for me, I'm not going to tolerate this, I'm not grateful for this because it's not actually healthy for me or my family. Practicing gratitude leads to stronger intolerance for those things and to root them out and to actually replace them to something that's life-giving. So again, it's not an ignorance or just ignoring what's wrong in the world, but it actually creates a stronger intolerance for those things. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the benefits of gratitude. And so there's a lot of research on this. So again, I would encourage you at the end of this presentation, I have the references. So if you're interested more on, how does this kind of work and, why is it that gratitude leads to these different benefits, I would encourage you to do more research. But just for today's presentation, I won't go into all of the background for it. But we do know that practicing gratitude can lead to a lot of great benefits for us. And so Emmons and colleagues noted there were several benefits of people who regularly practice gratitude. So some of those benefits, in the physical realm include stronger immune systems. They also were less bothered by aches and pains. So when they experienced that, they weren't as kind of consumed mentally with those. People who practice gratitude regularly do exercise more and take better care of their health. And I think that, I haven't dived too much into this research specifically, but my idea or my thought for that would be, it's because we appreciate the way our body works and the way it's functioning, and we want to take care of it. We want to, be a good steward of it. Lower blood pressure. If we practice gratitude, it leads to, I would think, again, that's related to stress. And so if we're not as stressed out as much, that can have a direct effect on our blood pressure. That's just, again, my thought with that. And then also people who practice gratitude on a regular basis do sleep longer and feel more refreshed when they wake up. So that, those are just some physical benefits of gratitude that we know of. So some social benefits of gratitude. So people, again, who practice gratitude on a regular basis tend to be more forgiving towards other people. They tend to feel less lonely and isolated. So I think that's especially important for the season of life that we're in within the year of 2020. They tend to be more helpful, generous, and compassionate towards others. And then they're more outgoing. So you can see just that the gratitude is such an amazing thing because it's not only benefiting us, on an individual basis, but it has so much good for the world around us and for, just even in our little, bubble of the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. It has so much potential for good. And then the third category is that it does really benefit various aspects of our psyche. And so if we think about with people who practice gratitude, they do experience more joy and pleasure. So Brother David Steinhall Rast, he's a Benedictine monk, and he's the founder of a network for grateful living. So again, that's the site that a lot of this information is stemming from. He wrote this interesting quote that I think is relevant. He said, "For it is not joy that makes us grateful, it is gratitude that makes us joyful." And so, practicing gratitude can lead to joy. And so sometimes I think people think, well, I have to feel joyful, I have to feel happy in order to experience gratitude. And it's quite the opposite, at least according to Brother David. And he's done a lot of work in this field as well. So another benefit of practicing gratitude is that, people are more alert, alive, and awake towards what's around them. They experience more optimism and happiness. So Robert Emmons, he comments that a number of studies have showed that if people have a grateful disposition, even in the face of trauma and adversity, they recover more quickly. So again, this is not to dismiss or minimize the seriousness and pain of any situation, but perhaps that gratefulness can help protect people against lasting anxiety and post-traumatic stress. So kind of along the same lines, there was a study in 2006 of Vietnam War veterans, and they found that those veterans who had higher levels of gratitude also had lower levels of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. So it has a very protective element as well of practicing gratitude. And then we also know that there's higher levels of positive emotions as well. So there's definitely a resilience benefit to practicing gratitude. It definitely has a direct impact on our resilience in some other ways. And so again, this is not an exhaustive list of the benefits of gratitude, but I just wanted to kind of put a couple categories for you out there. All right, so how do we actually cultivate gratitude, right? We've talked about what is gratitude, what are the benefits of gratitude, and then now, okay, how do we actually get this into our lives? So I think what's important to note about this is that, with these practices, we're not so much focused on adding another thing to put on your to-do list. We don't want to, make it just so that it's okay, this is another thing I have to get done throughout the week. But the hope is that you could take one or two of these practices, start to implement them in your lives and in your family's lives, and then, start to kind of see the way it actually changes you from the inside out. So it's not just, hey, I want to practice more gratitude, but I want to become a more grateful person. I want to become a person who's kind of overflowing with gratitude, even again in the worst of circumstances at times. So the first, I'll give you 10 steps again. So these are very practical, and not to be, I don't want this to be overwhelming, but just to take one or two of these and try to implement them. I think that you'll begin to see a pretty big shift in kind of your outlook on life. So one of the first things you can do is every day, just say aloud three good things that happen to you, or three things that you're grateful for. So again, these do not have to be rocket science, or they don't have to be crazy things that that happen to you. But it just could be, I'm really grateful that so I'll just do an example in my life. I'm really grateful that my puppy slept through the night and he didn't bark, and I got to be able to sleep a solid 7 or 8 hours. I'm really grateful for that, because sometimes that doesn't happen. I'm really grateful that my air conditioning is working, and that, I have, that in my life. And then another thing could be, I'm just grateful that I had coffee to drink this morning, that there was something that could wake me up so that I wasn't as groggy starting out the day. So those are just, again, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. And this is something fun, especially that you can do with your family or your roommates, anybody that you're kind of around on a regular basis. So it can be done at dinner, it can be done right before bed, or even also just by yourself. It doesn't have to be around other people. You could just out loud say three things. And I think speaking it can help solidify the gratitude that you would feel intrinsically. Another thing we can do is cultivating and trying to cultivate gratitude is keeping a gratitude journal. So this is something that you'll see kind of all over the place, and Dr. Robert Emmons also talks about this as one of his kind of first steps is keeping a gratitude journal. And so again, these don't have to be monumental. They can just be expressing gratitude for our ability to breathe, or the fact that we woke up this morning, and the ability to work, or the right to vote, things like that. They don't have to be anything crazy, but just writing down some things that you're grateful for on a regular basis. And and Dr. Emmons also talks about how, this can be especially helpful for when you are, struggling to feel grateful in any given day. If you just really are just having a hard time writing something down, even going back through what you've written in the past, that can help, begin to stimulate some gratitude as well, saying, hey, I'm really struggling right now, but look at all the things that have happened to me in the past that I'm grateful for. A third thing is that just to say thanks to your partner, but really this could be anybody. It doesn't have to just be your partner, but I think what the point is that it really can help, it can really benefit relationships, essentially. And so if we're thinking about couples, though, specifically, is that, if couples can say thanks to their partner about, thank you for doing the dishes, thank you for serving me, thank you for, taking the dog out, things like that. But when they do that, they establish a very effective feedback loop of trust and intimacy with one another, and it basically makes it so that both partners feel as though their needs are being met. So this is very helpful for loved ones, but it really can be, again, anybody in your life that you have a friendship with or some kind of relationship. Just to say, hey, thank you for just being a good friend. Thank you for checking in on me. Thank you for bringing me coffee the other day, whatever it is, and just being able to express that can do a lot of wonders for relationships. Another benefit, or another way that we can cultivate gratitude, is that we can cultivate it and use it whenever we are kind of not in a great mood, right? Especially if we're upset or angry. So if we are in a time that we're in an argument with somebody and we're about to say something that we might later regret, we can, instead of speaking right away, we can take a quick stock of 5 things that we're grateful for, and then again that can really help extinguish the fire of anger, because you're redirecting your attention on what's good and not the situation at hand. So again, in the moment that you're about to say something that you might regret later on, you can instead pause and just quickly try to think, again, not anything crazy, but just try to think of 5 things that you're grateful for in that moment. And that really can help, kind of calm down and cool a hot temper. The 5th way is just you also can thank yourself. So I know we talked about earlier that, when we talked about the recognition of where does good come from, it comes from outside of ourselves. I don't think that's to say that there's not a time that you can thank yourself, and especially for thanking yourself for implementing healthy habits. Thank you, saying thank you to yourself for going to the gym and taking care of your body, or eating food that is benefiting you, or getting enough sleep, or going out to coffee with a friend and maybe you didn't really feel like being social. So these kind of things that are good for us. 6thly, we can use gratitude, or we can cultivate gratitude by using technology. So a lot of us are using technology, I think probably more than ever, because of just the season of life that we're in, doing school and work online. So we can really use technology. We can use our phones especially to send 3 gratitude messages a week to different people. And this, not only helps you feel more grateful, but it strengthens the bond between you and your friends and your loved ones. So that can be something that's really good. And that's something I actually did the other day when I was preparing for this talk. I was like, that sounds like a really good idea. And so I actually did that with one of my friends. And we've been friends for a few years, and I just sent her a text message just appreciating the friendship that we've had, and so she, I think she was really touched by that, from her response, and so it really can do a lot of good in relationships. And then, another kind of idea with cultivating gratitude is we want to savor the things that are, really good and the good moments of our life. So in those moments that you're feeling very happy, stop and take stock of how you're feeling, the sensations that you're feeling and the thoughts that you're having. So in the future, when you're wanting to feel gratitude, and the actual emotion of it, when you're wanting to feel the emotion of gratitude, reflect back on that moment of happiness, on the memory of happiness. And then that can help kind of cultivate that same experience again. So really try to savor those things and being appreciative of them too. So regardless if you feel that emotion again in the future, just really kind of, I think, looking back and saying, I'm really grateful for that moment that I was able to experience so much joy. 8thly is that, we do want to try to look for the silver linings. And I think, again, this is something that sometimes can be, I think, abused when we're talking about gratitude, is like, oh, just look for the silver linings, just look for the, the good in the situation, because that can, for the person who's experiencing pain, that can feel kind of minimizing, like, well, no, there's a lot of hardship going on right now. And so I think that there is a delicacy around this, and definitely a wisdom to be had with kind of the timing of this. But I think for the person who's experiencing pain, in their kind of grieving process at their own speed, eventually being able to look for, okay, I know this is a really dark time, but what potentially could be some good things that maybe come out of this. And this might not be applicable for every single situation, because again, we know there are really hard things in life. But I think for the most part, I think for the most part, we can try to see, at least 1 or 2 things that potentially come out of this. Maybe we don't see it in the moment, but maybe years later, looking back and saying, what are some good things that could have come out of that. And then 9thly, we want to, when we're trying to cultivate gratitude, again, we look outward and not inwards. So people are more likely to feel grateful when they turn their attention to other people instead of, kind of navel gazing and listening to our own inner narratives about how things should have gone. So instead of ruminating about how things went wrong or things shouldn't be this way, trying to, look out towards others, and kind of putting their attention on other people. And so, and I think this kind of goes with the last one that we'll talk about, but really trying to look at, what are the needs of other people, and how can I, help facilitate and meet those needs. And I think that can really help us start to cultivate some gratitude that, hey, this person is in need, and maybe they are struggling with something that I don't struggle with, and I'm grateful that I don't have to struggle with those things, and I want to be able to help and support them. So again, I think looking outward can really help cultivate gratitude and not just fixated on our own kind of life and ruminations about how things should have gone. And then this is related, but changing our perspective. So taking the perspective of somebody who potentially has a different life than you do, and maybe they have different struggles than you do. and sometimes people can be worse off than we are. I think that can, again, that has potential for abuse, because we don't want to spend too long, I don't think, in that. But I think that there is a time and place for saying, hey, I'm really struggling with this relationship with a friend, but I'm really grateful I have a friend, because I know somebody who is experiencing a lot of loneliness and they don't have a lot of community in their life. So even if you're experiencing a hardship with somebody, just being grateful for the fact that you do have somebody in your life who cares about you, because maybe somebody else that you know of doesn't really have that. So I think, again, changing our perspective and being able to focus on the things that we do have in our life that maybe others don't. But I think that again, that drives us to social action of saying, okay, so other people don't have this. I might not be able to meet that need specifically, but how can I help, or how can I support? So we don't want to just like sit in that, be able to go out and actually enact change. I did want to end with a video. So I think this is a really powerful video, and something that comes from Brother David, and I talked about him earlier. So I'm going to, hopefully this works with the audio, and then we'll close out.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised that you have eyes you can open. That incredible array of colors that is constantly offered to us for pure enjoyment. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from moment to moment, with clouds coming and going. Open your eyes, look at that. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. All that life from generations and from so many places all over the world flows together and meets you here like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. Open your heart to the incredible gifts that civilization gives to us. You flip a switch and there is electric light. Turn a faucet and there is warm water and cold water and drinkable water. A gift that millions and millions in the world will never experience. And so I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you. That everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. Then it will really be a good day.
Okay, so I feel like I don't even want to talk after Brother David because his voice is very soothing. But I think that video, and besides the fact that it just honestly for me it makes me feel very at peace. But I think one of the main takeaways is that there's always something that we can express gratitude for. Again, even in the kind of the mundaneness of life, when it feels like nothing is changing or nothing exciting is happening, or even if something bad happens, there's always something that we can be, grateful for. Even if it's just, hey, I'm grateful that I have a brain that's able to cultivate thoughts or make thoughts that I'm thinking right now, something like that. So I just think that is a very freeing disposition to have towards life, that we don't have to depend on what happens to us, that we can actually feel gratitude, and then that, as we know, has so many powerful positive benefits in life. So I wanted to close with some resources. So this will actually be this slide will be made into a PDF, so you can click on these links. But the first is the website that we went to, or that I've pulled a lot of this information from, that you can see. Secondly, there's on that website, there's something called a daily practice space that actually can provide some really cool ways that you can, practice gratitude in your life, and kind of in an online space. And so they offer that there. Brother David has another kind of, I guess, more an outlook on how to cultivate gratitude. Today I gave a very practical steps on how to do it, but he kind of provides more of a perspective on how to cultivate it, called Stop, Look, and Go. So I would encourage you to look that up. There's also a 2020 happiness calendar for each month, and so I hyperlinked the one for November. And there's just daily things that you can do, again, to try to bring more gratitude into your life. I've also listed here CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, and then the Employee Assistance Program for any folks who may need those services. And then always want to provide the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Just not knowing where anyone is today in their headspace, always a resource in case you are struggling or a friend is struggling. So that is pretty much all of the material that I had for you all today. So thank you so much for taking the time to view this. I hope that it was helpful for you, and that you're able to take some of this away and be able to cultivate more gratitude. By no means was it an exhaustive presentation. There's so much more about gratitude out there, and I would encourage you to do more of your own research in it. But this is my contact information in case you do want to get in touch with me or have any questions or comments. But otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and a happy holiday season. Thank you.